So I wanted to talk about AI FOMO, or fear of missing out. I've got some notes here. You know, there's I think there's value in being real for a little while. And to start off with, I wanted to break FOMO down into kind of what I see as the four constituent components because I mean, if anyone who's paying attention knows that AI is big. And one of the ways that people try and cope is to minimize it. And that's just sticking your head in the sand. So if you're watching this, I'm assuming that you don't want to stick your head in the sand. All right, so the four components of FOMO, as I understand it, is money, status, opportunity, and security. The money one is pretty obvious. Anyone who's anyone recognizes that there's a lot of money to be made with artificial intelligence, and that's probably the first and simplest, most honest kind of FOMO. Like, man, I could have made so much money, or what if I had done this other idea, or this, that, or the other. Here's an example is Pete Stiegler. I don't know if I'm saying his name right, but Pete, the guy who made OpenClaw, he just went hog wild over a few months, built OpenClaw. It went ultra viral, and now he's got like a 6 or 7 figure job at OpenAI. Great, why didn't I do that? I've been working on cognitive architectures for 4 years. So, that's a personal example. Like, that could have been me. Son of a gun, as my dad might say. Then status. Social status, trying to get higher in the hierarchy. Actually, that view is really good. Let me turn around. Give you guys a really pretty view. So, social status is huge. All social animals care about social status, whether you like it or not. Like, that's just part of the human operating system. And not only are fortunes being made, but fame as well. And, I just want to head this off at the pass because some people will be like, Dave, you have a channel with almost 200,000 subscribers and this, that, and the other. It's like you're clearly higher fame, and social status, it depends on, like, is it just follower count or is it prestige? Is it money? Whatever, But there's people that are way more famous than me. And that's what I mean. It's like we're very, very status conscious. And so whenever there's a high rate of flux, I'm drawing a diagram in my mind down here. Whenever there's a high rate of social flux, your chimpanzee brain, your primate brain, I should say, is very aware of what's changing. Also, if you see the girls, the brown one is Heidi. She's an Australian Shepherd working line. And the blondie is Mandy, and she is a Carolina Dog Husky mix. Those are our girls, and they're waiting very patiently. So I'm not going to make this take too long. But so we're all status conscious, and then there's opportunity. So this is all kind of tied up. Maybe opportunity is kind of like a layer above, where it's like you have an opportunity for money, you have an opportunity for status, but there's also missed opportunities. And then finally, security. This is what drives a lot of anxiety. I mean, all of these drive fear and anxiety, hence FOMO. But, the need for security, knowing that you're going to be okay, that your family's going to be okay, that sort of thing. So that's what I mean by AI FOMO. So now let's get into how I personally cope with it. Because, yeah, I got it too. The first point on my little handy dandy list is that we're still very early. I remind myself we're very early, and what that translates to is there's a lot of new opportunities that haven't manifested yet. And let me give you a personal example, because I started my YouTube channel before ChatGPT, just doing experiments with GPT-3, and I had 5,000 subscribers when ChatGPT popped off, and then my channel, I was at 100,000 subscribers in 9 months. And then, it's continued. And of course, the subscriber growth has slowed down as the whole social media landscape has become more saturated with AI influencers. But then post-labor economics is like my next big opportunity. And, you know, hopefully, knock on wood, I'm ahead of the curve, and I'll be well positioned to make use of that as well. Now, it's like, you know, it might sound a little cynical, like don't let any good crisis go to waste, but like that's an example of a new opportunity that may or may not manifest. So point 2 about coping with FOMO is just accepting the fact that some people are going to win big, and some people are going to win way bigger than me, right? There's YouTube channels that pivoted from gaming to AI, and they, you know, because they have a decade and a half of, you know, production quality and that sort of stuff, they, you know, they blew up faster than me. There's business people that are making more money, and just not being envious or resentful. And envy and resentment are just natural human responses to like, damn it, what are they doing that, what do they know that I don't, right? And it's not a matter of being, you know, trying to self-deceive, and just recognizing, yeah, like that could have been me, that sucks, but trying to be happy for other people, and also just owning it. Like, yeah, like I'm a little jealous of some of these people, whether they're influencers or business leaders or developers or whatever. You know, and really just trying to focus on what I can do. And that's like, you know, I'm a big critic of stoicism, but, you know, what do I have control over? I have control over my next actions. Point 3 is continue to try and position myself well. So one thing is like, we are early, right? We're still very early. And whenever I have that energy, that like envy or that FOMO or whatever, I'm like, how can I redirect this energy to something productive? And I'm like, let me just focus on something that I do have control over right now. Is there a skill I can develop? Is there a thought I can develop? Is there a piece of content that I can put out there in the world? That sort of thing. So just continuously trying to position myself well. And also, it doesn't necessarily, positioning yourself well doesn't have to be strictly to make money. You know, look where I'm at physically. You know, my wife and I, we moved to a smaller town. We bought a cottage on the edge of town. It's highly affordable, and it affords us a low impact, low cost way of living. So that's also a kind of positioning. Point number 4 is to keep myself grounded, I focus on history. And so what I mean by focusing on history is like, yeah, like industrial revolutions, Engels pause, the Luddite rebellions, like all kinds of stuff has gone bad. But then also, like, I remind myself not to feel super entitled, because it's like, man, it could have been so much worse. Like my dad, just here's an example. My dad was I think second generation or third generation immigrant from Europe. And so when my ancestors got to America, like they were dirt poor. And my aunt told me about how when they were really little, they basically lived in a shack on a beach somewhere with no power, no running water. Like they were poor. And, you know, you inherit some of that financial trauma. You know, like just as an example, my dad had this had this ancient riding lawnmower for years and years and years and refused to replace it, even though he made $500,000 a year running a business. I'm like, Dad, you're wasting more time and money trying to keep this old thing running than just replacing it. But that's that poverty mentality, right? So he had that poverty mindset, and I kind of learned the opposite. I'm like, no, it's worth it to spend the money to keep things working and new. But again, that's like a second or third generation response to poverty trauma. It's like, no, I'm gonna spend the money to make things work well. Because like we got stranded for 9 hours on the way to a vacation one time because he had an old truck and the truck broke down, and so we had to just sit there and wait while they fixed it. And I'm like, no, I'm gonna keep my vehicles running. So you know, that might sound like quite a tangent, but the point is focus on not just the grand arc of history, but your history, your family history, and the things that you've been through. And it's like, you know what, if they could survive, you know, on a shoestring budget and survive that poverty, I think I'll be fine, you know. And it's scary. Like I've mentioned this on the channel before, but during the Great Recession, like I was homeless briefly, you know, for a month. That's not the same as being like an unhoused person with chronic mental health issues who's been on the street for years. I'm not saying that I've had that experience, but it's like I've been living in a car, and like, yeah, it sucked. I don't want to do it again, but it sucked and I survived. Number 5 is let go of competition. Because so much of FOMO, I think, is an ordinal game. So it's an ordinal game means like there's winners and losers. And that's zero-sum thinking. And letting go of competition is recognizing that the goal is actually to create a system where that's not zero-sum. A system or a new set of outcomes where it's win-win, right? Where it's positive sum game, which is actually one of the biggest reasons why every bit of code that I've ever produced is open source, is because it's like, if I can inspire or solve problems for someone else, then that's more value, and I will still get to capture that value in the long run personally, because I will live in a world that has more automation and more abundance. And I've had people reach out, they're like, oh yeah, like that memory thing that you did a couple years ago solved so many problems for us. And I'm like, cool, can I get a royalty check? And they're like, no. Like, that's fine. You know, but just the satisfaction of knowing I solved some really cool problems. And I continue to inspire people. I like at least once a week, someone messages on, you know, a platform or leaves a comment like, man, you've changed things for me. And just like, if I can keep doing that and I keep building that consensus that like we can do a positive sum, we can get away from zero sum, then it's PvE, right? Player versus environment. The enemy is not each other. The enemy is despair. The enemy is, you know, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. You know, okay, cheesy historical line, but you get the idea. And then the last point that I've written down is just get offline. You know, I've been basically on the couch for almost 18 months. And so I spend a lot more time online than I would prefer. And what I've noticed is that just turning your computer and phone and TV, just turning everything off for literally just 15 minutes is enough for a reset. I actually have an egg timer. I do this every now and then. I should do it more often. But I have an egg timer and I set it to an hour. I turn everything off and I just said, let myself get really freaking bored for an hour. And I swear to God, within 5 minutes, I'm cleaning the house, I'm tidying up, I'm, you know, doing chores, and then the hour switches, like the egg timer goes off after an hour, and then I'm like, I don't feel the need to turn anything back on. And you feel so much better when you're offline. So that's where I'll leave you. I'll say just get offline. If you're watching this video, turn your phone off, turn YouTube off, shut it all down, and just be bored. If you've got an egg timer, set an egg timer and just let yourself be bored and see what happens. All right, that's it. Have a good one.